Says the Heilige Rebbe, Sichos HaRan Tzadi Zayin. Very short sicha, all of how many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 words, an 8-word sicha. The tzaddik says, Da, each and every one of us should know that al yidei b'soiris tovos, when there's good news, al yidei b'soiris tovos yichoylin loymar Tehillim, then it's possible to say Tehillim. Which on the face of it is a strange sicha. It's always possible to say Tehillim, is it not? And you open up a Tehillim and you say the words. But what's the premise of this that the Rebbe is saying? That there needs to be some kind of prerequisite, there needs to be some kind of condition met to say Tehillim. Much more than the Rebbe telling us what that condition is the fact that the Rebbe is telling us that there's more to Tehillim than just reading Tehillim. There's a way in which you're Yachal Loymar Tehillim, and there's the way in which Chas v'shalom, a person is not Yachal Loymar Tehillim. Hayos, even though the person may be sitting and reading the words of Tehillim, the premise of this teaching is that it's not so simple. Because Loymar Tehillim is not simply opening up the book of Psalms, and reading the words of David HaMelech. Reading Tehillim is an experience. Reading Tehillim requires openness of the heart. David HaMelech was the Liban Shel Yisrael. He was the heart of the Jewish nation. And it requires a certain degree of opening, of openness, to be able to properly engage in this incredible avoda of really truly saying Tehillim mamish. And the Rebbe says that one of the ways to be able to say Tehillim, like Tehillim was meant to be said, is al yidei b'soiris tovos. When a person experiences joy, person experiences something that happens in their life that reminds them that Hashem is looking out for them, that reminds them that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, who's helping that person, who loves that person, who cares for that person. B'soiris tovos, good things happen, says the Rebbe. That's a Pesach. There was an opening. There's something that you can take advantage of in that moment. Where Yechoylin Loymar Tehillim. You should channel your joy straight into Tehillim, if possible. And so this is like another thing to be conscious of as we go through life. It's a deeper level of awareness. When something positive happens, to think to ourselves that this should be one of the things that our mind goes to. We have an opportunity now. My heart is open. The gate of Tehillim is open to me. Much more than I'm obsessed with thinking about the positive thing that happened. Obviously we rejoice, and obviously we're so happy, and we can thank Hashem for that itself, without a question. But Rabbi Nachman is saying something deeper. He's saying, no, there's an opportunity here to get close to Hashem in a way that without this openness that was gifted to me through the B'saira Tova, through this positive thing, I might not be able to serve Hashem through Tehillim in this way. So right now, again, we're thinking to ourselves, Gewalt, I have an opportunity to get close to Hashem now in a way that I couldn't 10 minutes ago. Let me go and channel it. So before celebrating and telling your friends and whatever it is, you got a promotion, you quickly run to the bookshelf, you take out a Tehillim, Gewalt. There's a door that's open. Al yidei b'soiris tovos. Then we can say Tehillim, you could add in brackets, the way Tehillim was intended to be said. You can always say Tehillim, that's not the point. But to mamish say Tehillim, says the Rebbe, this is a new way to approach B'suris Tovos. You hear a good thing, Gewalt, aside from the positive elements of the good thing in and of itself, there's an opportunity here to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we should use, that we should grab hold of and be appreciative for. Okay, so that's Sichos HaRan Tzadi Zayin, a very tiny sicha, but hopefully a very practical sicha. Not only because we will listen to what the Rebbe is saying and channel things to the realm of Avodas Hashem, but that Be'ezras Hashem we should be given lots of B'suras Tovos and therefore have lots and lots of opportunities to channel our positive feelings and our simcha and our joy and our thankfulness and gratitude into Avodas Hashem. Okay, so that's Sicha Tzadi Zayin. Let's jump into Sicha Tzadi Ches, number 98, and the reason that you see a letter A here is the Chevra who've been with us on this journey know that some of the sichos are longer. We don't get a chance to finish them properly in one particular shir, and the same is the case for Tzadi Ches. It'll probably take us 2 weeks to go through, and so I didn't even bring the whole sicha because it's really like almost 2 sichas in one, even though for sure they're connected, but there's really 2 separate parts of the sicha, and I want to take each one at a time. And then there's a lot of different sources throughout Kisvei Breslov also on the theme of Amiras Tehillim, which, as we'll see, is very apropos for our time where we are in the year, which is another theme that we've experienced again and again and again, the crazy, wild hashkacha that so many times, whatever it is, we pick up this series, we stop this series, I'm not able to do it a week, and it works out mamish with a perfect calculation that the pieces that we're learning should be applicable to the Zman where we find ourselves in. It's a davar pele, mamish a davar pele, which we've seen again and again and again, and this time is no exception, as we'll see the application of Amiras Tehillim Dafka for the month of Elul and preparing for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so let's take a look at the first part over here of Sichos HaRan Tzadi Ches, and again, it's such a privilege to be sitting here learning with all of you. I know it's a huge commitment of time. It's not simple. We're all very busy. The fact that we take of our time every week, or at least we try to make it every week, to get together and to learn this limud is super dear to me personally. But beyond that, infinitely beyond that, I can't even imagine the nachas ruach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has from Yidden who are really just trying to get close to Him and trying to connect to His tzaddikim and trying to connect to hope, not to chas v'shalom, not to give up hope. It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. Ashreinu ma tov chalkeinu. So let's take a look at Sichos HaRan Tzadi Ches 98. And the Rebbe says, Da Amiras Tehillim Ma'ala Gedola. Saying Tehillim is a tremendous experience. Ki ilu Amram David HaMelech ba'atzmai. When a Yid says Tehillim, it's as if Ki ilu David HaMelech is saying these words himself. Ki hu Amram B'ruach HaKodesh. Because David HaMelech said the words of Tehillim, and he composed the words of Tehillim with a tremendous degree of Ruach HaKodesh. But Ruach HaKodesh munach b'soich hatevos, and the Ruach HaKodesh of David HaMelech is invested into the particular words that he chose to use, which I don't even imagine David HaMelech chose to use these words. You can't really imagine David HaMelech sitting down and trying to write Tehillim. It was like a thing that he had to work on. Obviously, it flowed forth from the deepest essence of his being. He probably didn't have to think about it consciously. It just mamish, flowed out of his heart. Flowed out of his kishkas, flowed out of his essence. So when David HaMelech said these words, and the Ruach HaKodesh became invested within the words, Hu ma'oirer beruach piv es Ruach HaKodesh ad shenechshav kilu amram David HaMelech alav hashalom ba'atzmai. When we sit and say Tehillim, we are awakening the Ruach HaKodesh that David HaMelech b'chvoidai uva'atzmai put into Tehillim when he composed Tehillim, or when Tehillim was nisgala, was revealed through David HaMelech. And when we sit down with the Tehillim and we are saying these words, it's mamish beyond what Chazal say, sivsoisav doivavos bekever, that a person says something in the name of the person who said them. So whatever this means, the person's lips are moving in the grave, whatever that means. But it's beyond this. It's beyond it. It's mamish David HaMelech himself that's speaking. Mamish David HaMelech himself. And I heard a beautiful Torah, so we have a small chabura here, and we've been learning Likutei Moharan Be'iyun with a small group of mostly educators, but Yidden who are connecting to the Rebbe. It's like a late night chabura. It's part of a network called Toras Chaim, which is taking what's called Torah Zmanis, takes specific teachings and just goes with them for a few months. And so that's been a very beautiful experience with a couple of the Chevra here in London. And we're actually learning Torah Ayin Gimel in Tinyana, which we're about to see. You can look down to the bottom of the screen. You see Likutei Moharan Tinyana 73, which is all about Tehillim on this Nekuda. We're going to see a little bit from that in a minute. But one of the Chaverim has said now 2 times, because he said it over at the Thursday night shir, and then again last night, this very beautiful Torah that I think he said it over the name of the Panovich Rav, if I'm not mistaken. I have to ask him. But he said the Panovich Rav asks, we know that Adam Rishon was supposed to live 1,000 years, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu took off 70 years and gave 70 years to David HaMelech, because David HaMelech was supposed to be a Nefel. David HaMelech was stillborn. And Adam Rishon gave of his years that David HaMelech should be able to live in this world, which is obviously so deep, so incredibly, remarkably deep. Whatever, all the layers of what that means. So the Panovich Rav asks, why did it have to come from Adam Rishon's cheshbon? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't like, listen, if he's not meant to live, so then he shouldn't live. And if he's meant to live, so what does he have to take years from someone else? HaKadosh Baruch Hu has enough life, to give to every person, the same way that every person is alive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, Api the Cheshbin, that David was supposed to live, so then give him life. But what does it have to come out of Adam Rishon's life? So the Panovich Rav said, it's mamash this nekuda, that David HaMelech was asid to write Tehillim, which is going to be a sefer that is shaykh, as we're going to see, Be'ezus Hashem in the sources, it's shaykh to every single Jew, no matter what the circumstance is, and throughout the varied circumstances that we experience throughout the journey, over the journey of our lives. And somehow, at every moment in life, there's a Tehillim that's applicable, chas v'shalom, whether there's a tzara, chas v'shalom, whether there's somebody's ill and we're davening for refuah, or when we're rejoicing and we're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Psuke de Zimra, Hallel, all the different Yamim Tovim, it's all filled with David HaMelech, with Tehillim. So the Panovich Rav said it would have been impossible for David HaMelech's Tehillim to be so universally relevant if David HaMelech's life hadn't been from the human being that was mamish created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoidoi uva'atzmai. Meaning it wasn't stam that HaKadosh Baruch Hu found 70 years, whatever, and decided to give David HaMelech 70 years. It's that mamish David HaMelech is a chelek kiviyachol of Adam Harishon, who includes within himself all of humanity, who is the Pshpitz Tzelem Elikim, that was created Yitzir Kapav of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, that Memela David HaMelech's life force comes from that place of the universal man, so that his words should be universal to every man and woman throughout history. Very powerful. And so when we're going ahead and saying Tehillim, it's not stam we're saying someone else's words. It's David HaMelech. It's that energy that's nesgala and is channeled into the words that we're saying. V'hu mesugol ma'od, the Rebbe continues, it's very mesugol. It can have a tremendous benefit. L'rapos ha'chayla. Or rather, it's part of a longer sentence, in order to be merape a chayla, that a person who's ill, chas v'shalom, bar minan, should become healed, it's mesugol ma'od for that chayla liyaslei bitachon rak al Hashem yizbarach. To just have bitachon in Hashem, like the Shar Bitachon tells us that in a chanami a person goes to Sibas, v'rape yirape. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said there's a thing called nature, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave permission, v'rape yirape, that there's refuahs in the world. Like we learned, I think, earlier on in Sichos HaRan, we had a shir talking about Rabbi Nachman's suspicion, at least of the medicine of those days, and certainly the consciousness of chas v'shalom thinking that the medicine is healing, the medicine is not healing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the roifei choylei Amei Yisrael. But a person goes and they go through sibas, like the Shar bitachon says. But the bitachon is that it's not the medicine that's healing. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashkacha that's healing. Va'abayteach ba'Hashem chesed yisayvevenu. Not the medicine. It's the bitachon. Says the Rebbe, Shal yedei amiras Tehillim yoshiyai Hashem. So Tehillim is that place where the chayla is able to channel his bitachon, realizing that's what's healing. Also, there's a chayk, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, like all the chukim, when it comes to parnasa, b'zeas hapecha toicha lechem, what can you do? Hashem coded the world in such a way that a person has to go out and make parnasa. And it's not a Torah for a person to sit at home and say, no, I have bitachon. It doesn't work that way, unless a person's mamish on the madrega. But the standard mahalach is, yafet Torah derech eretz, a person goes, and they make a parnasa. A person's ill, chas v'shalom, person goes and goes through sibos. But ultimately, it's the Tehillim, where the person is reminded and a person encourages themselves to be strong in the inyan of bitachon. Sha'idei amiras Tehillim yoshiyai Hashem. It's through tefillah alone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is healing the person. V'habitachon hu b'chinas mishenes. Says the Rebbe so beautifully, bitachon is the aspect of a staff, like a walking stick. A person is hiking, a person takes a staff that they lean on, especially a person who's not able to walk so well. that it's not just, stam to make it easier, that they pasha can't walk without the stick. It's a mishenes. They rely, they lean, they depend on that staff. Mita, it's really mata, that a person is leaning on a mata, on a stick. So bitachon is mishenes. Person wants to know, what can I really rely on in this world? Anything else we can't rely on, because it's not worth relying on. Because any siba that a person thinks that they're really going to lean on and rely on, it's kala v'nifsad. It's not mechuyev hametzias. It's efshari hametzias. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work, but you can't rely on it completely in this world. The only thing that's absolutely reliable is bitachon. Kain hu nishan ala bitachon. A person leans on bitachon. Sheboiteach sheyashiyoi Hashem. That a person knows that a Kadosh Baruch Hu will save. And a person knows that ultimately, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, chas v'shalom, for whatever cheshbon, that this is not right for the person to be healed so easily in this way, bitachon covers that as well, because we realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what He's doing. It's His world. And kol mada abed rachman l'tav avid, like we learned in our Sunday share in Keser Shem Tov. If you haven't seen the recording, it's up on YouTube. Or, like the Baal Shem Tov says, a higher madrega or a more specific madrega to say gamzu l'taiva. But bitachon is something you can rely on. Keinu nishan ala bitachon. That's a life. That's mamish a life. Person relies on that which is always there, which is, again, the mechuyev hametzias. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the real existent. The one that's really there forever and ever and ever and ever. Sheboiteach sheyashiyoi Hashem, k'may sha'amar David, and that's what David HaMelech says in Tehillim himself, Vayeh Hashem l'mishan li. Hashem is what I rely on. Such a beautiful thing we say in Hallel. Al tiftichu b'nedivim. David HaMelech also, don't rely on people, but ben adam she'ein lo yeshua. We don't rely on humans. We don't rely on people. Remember, Yosef HaTzadik, on his level, was a huge pagam, right? When he tells the person who's being taken out, remember me, to mention me to Parai. And that was a pagam. Because al tiftichu b'nedivim. Vayhi Hashem l'mishan li. We rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'al kein al yidei zeh nisrapa ha'choyle k'may shekasav im yakom v'yisalech b'chutz al mesh'antoi v'nika. That's how a person is healed. It's the pasuk in Shemais, im yakom v'yisalech b'chutz, if a person will stand up and walk al mesh'antoi, leaning on his mesh'antoi v'nika, and a person will be cleansed, will be healed. And mesh'antoi over there, says the Rebbe, is also a reference to bitachon. And this is the pasuk in Shayahu that refers to Mashiach ben David. And it says, V'yatza choiter migeza yishai. A choiter will branch out, migeza yishai. What's a choiter? Also is a stick, is a staff. That Yishai, which is, Geza Yishai is David HaMelech, David ben Yishai, brought to the world the concept of the choiter. It's an exact metaphor, not stam. Oh, that there will be part of the family tree of King David. No, it's much deeper than this. Yatza choiter migeza yishai. You know what David HaMelech brought to the world? He brought to the world the concept of the choiter, of the branch, of the stick, of the walking staff. Hanemar al Mashiach, shehu David, who is completely filled with Ruach HaKodesh, Bechinas Ruach Apenu Mashiach Hashem. And that's the Ruach HaKodesh of David HaMelech. That's what David HaMelech is bringing to the world. The Ruach HaKodesh of Tehillim, that the whole Tehillim is bitachon. The whole Tehillim is a dialogue between man and Creator with nothing else in the way. Because there isn't anything else in the way. Because there isn't anything else. Because it's all Him, it's all Him, it's all Him. Ein oid milvadai. That's Tehillim. The Tehillim is this choiter, this staff, that emerges migeza yishai, which he filled with his ruach apenu Mashiach Hashem, with his ruach hakodesh. And when you and I sit and we're learning and we're learning and saying Tehillim in the way that, like we said earlier, Tehillim was meant to be said, and Hashem gifts us with an openness of heart, a breslov of heart, a leiv basar, right, which is the letters breslov, a feeling heart that doesn't just say the words and murmurs liturgy, but mamish says Tehillim with fire, mamish fire. So in that moment is being revealed the Ruach of David HaMelech, the Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem. We have something to rely on in this life. The Rebbe continues, this is what the Gemara Psachim, and he brings it from the Zohar Kadosh in a few places, says, Asidin tzadikin sheyichayu mesim ayidei hamishenes. That la'asid lavai, the tzadikim will bring people to life, corpses will be brought to life, ayidei hamishenes. Through, again, on a simple level, it means through the stick, through the staff. And we learn it from Elisha, Bechinas ve'ish mishanta biyadai, or as the pasuk refers to the end of time, that the ish mishanta biyadam Rav Yamim, that Yerushalayim, the streets will be filled. The streets will be filled, and ish mishanta biyadai. Ish is a reference to the tzaddik. We'll have mishanta biyadai. We'll have a staff to bring everybody to life. Bechinas v'nasata mishenes al pnei anar, by Elisha, the Isha Hashenamis, where he brought the child to life through the mishenes. And of course, Al Pi Pshat, it comes really back from Moshe Rabbeinu with his mateh, but this is the idea of a wand, in the culture. It comes from this. But they don't begin to understand what the concept of the wand, what the concept of a stick, it's all a metaphor. Because it had nothing to do with the stick. It wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu who was doing things. Al Pi Hashem Yachanu, Al Pi Hashem Yiso, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Beruach Piv. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is making things happen. The stick is there to remind us how much we need to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the stick is. And instead it becomes a wand where every evil wizard, uses it and takes advantage of the whole world through his magic. It's punkt fakert from what the quote-unquote the wand is. What's the wand? The wand is what bitachon is. So they're holding the wand wrong, Bichlal. The wand is not meant to be pointed straight. The wand is meant to be firmly rooted on the ground. It's to be leaned upon, because it's a metaphor for bitachon, and the way that we rely and lean on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's what it means, that Elisha brought the child to life through his stick. Again, what stick? What are we talking about? Go back to Tehillim Yud Ches. Vayihi Hashem lemishan li. Hashem is the walking staff that we're leaning on, that we're relying on. And that's what it means, that tzadikim la'asad lavai are going to be mechayim mesim al yedei hamishenes, which is so beautiful because it's so much more relevant and practical. Obviously, we believe also there's going to be tchias hamesim, but I don't know about you, sometimes I feel like a mace. Umekayim emunasei liyashenei afar. It doesn't just mean those who are mamish dead. It means that there are people who are living without emunah. And that means that us, so many times, or so much of the time, myself, we fall away from emunah. And in that moment, it's mamish b'china of misa. Because what kind of life is that? How can we live without Hashem? How can we live without the clarity that Hashem is mamish real, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world, and that the ship is heading to a very clear destination, everything's going according to plan? Bitachon. In our lives personally and in the world at large, it's impossible to live. The bitterness is impossible to bear. Mar li mar, it's too bitter. And so tzadikim are mechayim mesim al yedei mishenes. In this sense, doesn't just mean that there's going to come a time tchias hamesim when actually the dead bodies will come to life because tzadikim are walking around waving sticks. Al pi everything we're saying, it means that Rabbi Nachman brings me to life. That tzaddik is mechayim mesim, meaning myself and ourselves, al yedei mishenes, through teaching us about bitachon, through teaching us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reliable. Not that it's possible for the human to rely on Hashem, but b'chlal we need to be convinced that Hashem is reliable. That Toiv Hashem lakol, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good and His plan is good. And that includes every single aspect of it, even though we're not able to see it on this side of the tapestry. B'yom hahu, there's going to come a day, Hashem echad u'shmoi echad kulei ha'toiv ha'metiv, where we're going to be able to see it. And the tzaddikim are giving us a taste of this perspective, even though from our perspective, currently in this realm, we can't live that way. And a tragedy is a tragedy. and we feel frustrated by the limitations of the way that the world is operating, and we yearn for it to be fixed, and we yearn to be part of the fixing. And all this is true. But at the same time, we're brought to life by the mishenes of the tzaddikim. By this that the tzaddikim teach us how to have bitachon again. How to be able to really trust in Hashem. How to be able to really daven. How to be able to really make Hashem real in our lives. More than anything else is real. We see Hashem first, and then we see the world. Like the Baal Shem Tov says in Keser Shem Tov, what he wanted his students. Before looking at a chair, you see Hashem, and you see a chair. You see mitzias, you see reality, you see anything. You experience anything. We're swimming in Elokus. We're swimming in the Gilui of Hashem's presence. Bechinas ve'ish mish'ante biyadai. Bechinas v'nesata ha'mishenes al panei anar ad kan. So Reb Nosson writes over here at the end of this segment, again, Sichos HaRan Tzadik Ches has two parts. We're going to get to the second part next week, Be'ezras Hashem. So he writes over here, calls it Lenichta B'Shleimus. He says he didn't write it so what he felt wasn't so clear. He says, whatever I remembered, I wrote. And you find that many times in Kisvei Breslov, because Reb Nosson was so emistic that he wants it to be very clear that he didn't make up a stitch, not a little tiny bit was made up. Every single thing that he wrote was what he remembered. If he didn't remember, he did not write. So everything is a very faithful transmission of what Rabbi Nachman was teaching. So let's now take a look at a number of sources throughout Kisvei Breslov that are sovev around this concept of Tehillim and its relationship with tshuva, its relationship with healing, its relationship with bitachon. Okay, and the first teaching we're going to look at is the teaching I mentioned, Likutei Moharan Tinyana Ayin Gimel. And the tzaddik says like this. I just took part of the teaching, not the whole thing. That's why there are 3 dots over there, because we're skipping out most of it. I just took from the very beginning and close to the end. Li'inyanenu. Misha roitza lizkais l'tshuva. Says Rabbi Nachman, a person who would like to merit to return to a more ideal state of being, to return to Hashem, to return to ourselves, to return to a life of clarity. Yeragil ba'amiras tehillim. This person should be constantly accustomed to saying Tehillim. Ki amiras Tehillim misugal l'tshuva. Because saying Tehillim is a huge opportunity to open doors. Rabbi Nachman explains over there, every person has a gate of tshuva that's connected to their own neshama. Some people have no connection or interest in tshuva at all. And some people have interest in doing tshuva, but they can't find their gate. And some people find their gate, but the gate is closed. Says the Rebbe, through Tehillim, even the person who has no hisayros for tshuva, that person will be awakened, and they'll be able to find their gate that's shaykh to their neshama, and the gate will open. And the Rebbe explains how this works very deeply. Ayin Sham, take a look over there, you'll see the whole teaching in its entirety. Nimsa, the Rebbe continues toward the end, She'ikar Hayrasa Tshuva Yidei David HaMelech. David HaMelech is the beacon of tshuva. And he quotes earlier the Maimer Chazal that teaches that David HaMelech was pushed into this experience, whatever this was with Bathsheba, Kidei Lahayris Tshuva Liyachid. So David HaMelech should serve as the model for what it looks like for an individual who wants to do tshuva, wants to return. That's David HaMelech. His whole thing is tshuva. The ikra tshuva shal David HaMelech haya sefer Tehillim. Sefer Tehillim is the tshuva of David. That's how he did tshuva. The whole Tehillim is filled with him pleading with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take me back. Tzamalacha nafshi, kamalacha besari. I'm yearning for you. I'm thirsting for you. The whole Tehillim is filled with these expressions of David HaMelech begging Hashem to take him home. Sha'amrei, that he said this Tehillim B'Sayr is Gadol Ma'oid, with such incredible inspiration. And again, these words, Uberuach HaKodesh, Ruach Apenu Mashiach Hashem. That's the Messianic spirit. And that was so deep, and that was so broad and expansive, like we said, channeling the neshama of Adam Arishan, who included all people, every neshama. Yitzir Kapav of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Hashem's creation. Ad shekol echad vi echad kefi mashehu. to the point that every single individual, no matter what they are, no matter what's going on in their life, no matter what they're dealing with, struggling with, rejoicing about, no matter what's going on in that person's life, yachal limtzai es atzmai b'seich sefer Tehillim. They can find themselves reflected in sefer Tehillim. Today everybody's trying to find themselves. People are taking long journeys to the east and trips around the world. People are looking for themselves. And over here you find this expression in Rabbi Nachman, you can find yourself. You find yourself in sefer Tehillim. Because it turns out that yourself is not yourself. It turns out that yourself and myself is part of the self of the collective soul of the Jewish nation. It's part of Knesset Yisrael. That's where we find ourselves. That's the Jewish identity. We're part of something so much bigger than our own little tiny worlds as individuals. And Sefer Tehillim is the melting pot, the meeting place of all the different multifarious energies that are found within this thing called Knesset Yisrael, that was embodied in David HaMelech, which is the Indian of the Shechina, which is the Indian of Knesset Yisrael, which is the heart of the whole Jewish nation. You can find yourself there in Sefer Tehillim. V'lizkos l'tshuva al yedei amiras Tehillim, and so Tehillim can bring a person, like we said before, even if a person has no connection at all. Person opens a Tehillim, you can't just read it, but you know what the words mean. When we start to read these words of longing and yearning and clarity and truth, and a person gets the Hisayrus to return. More than that, a person is able to find their own particular gate to return, and even deeper, the gate is blasted open. And it's mamish b'derech hamelech neilech. B'derech David hamelech neilech. That's the derech hamelech. That's the derech of David hamelech. Tehillim is the derech hamelech. It's just, you avoid all obstacles, all traffic, all anything. It's just straight through. Straight through to tshuva. Straight through to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's embrace. And we take a look at another teaching, not that much further along in Likutei Moharan Tinyana, which is the second volume of Likutei Moharan, Torah Kuf Aleph. And the Rebbe says over here, the same thing when a person is saying Tehillim or anything similar. So a person is saying Slichas, or a person is saying Kinnis, Chas v'Shalom, on Tisha B'Av, a person is saying any other tefillas, whether it's Likutei Tefillas or it's the tefillas of the Chidah, or a person writes their own tefillah, whatever it is. But a person should see to it sheyimsas atzmei b'seich kol mizmoire tehillim u'b'seich kol atchinas u'bakashas u'slichas v'chayotze. Whatever a person is saying, find yourself in it. It's not just liturgy. It's not simply, this is the prayer book, the Psalter, and you walk into the synagogue and you open it up, and it doesn't make a difference if you're holding it upside down or whatever it is, as long as you say the word. No, that's not what it's meant to be. David HaMelech's words are an invitation to mamish open our own hearts and really be present with our Tehillim. And when I say Tehillim, I don't just mean Sefer Tehillim. The whole Siddur is Tehillim. Going to come now to Rosh Hashanah, the whole Rosh Hashanah davening come out. Psukim from Tehillim. To find ourselves in that. What a journey, what an odyssey. To find the collective soul of the Jewish nation refracted in our own circumstances, our own drama, our own lives, but recognizing that this is just one tiny gilui that's part of something so much bigger. Says the Rebbe, ubefrat b'tehillim. This is true of many different kinds of tefillah, but specifically Tehillim shenemar b'shvil klal Yisrael, because it was said for you and me. B'shvil kol echad v'echad befrat. David HaMelech had me in mind. David HaMelech had you in mind. And I shouldn't say in mind. David HaMelech was so heart, he had us in his heart when he was composing Tehillim. With every specific detail of our life story and of our struggle and of our challenge and of our difficulty. With every nuance of the ups and downs and the successes and the failures and the yearning and the striving and our own particular circumstances, our tchunas hanefesh, our story. Like amos ki echya v'asaper maseh ka. This is from David HaMelech, who understood that life is a story. Now, all of our stories are part of Tehillim. They're all in there. So v'chol adam, each and every person, kol milchamas hayetzer sheyesh lo v'chol masha nasi imay, all the different challenges that they have with the various pantheon of different manifestations of the Yetzer Hara. V'chol masha nasi imay, all of his circumstances, the things that we're going through. Hakol meva'er u'mefarish b'Tehillim. You can find references to all of it in Sefer Tehillim. Because David HaMelech in Tehillim asking Hashem to save him, as he so often does, from his enemies, is primarily a reference to the inner demons, to the nachash inside, to the challenges that we face, maybe in a certain sense, are of our own creation that we're grappling with in our own lives. Because those are the oivim that really count. Everything else is silly. They can tune it out and ignore it. They can deal with it or not deal with it. The enemies, it's mashu acher. I mean, that's important. Obviously, it's important. But from the standpoint of why we're alive in this world, the Yetzer Haras of shallowness, of hopelessness, of cynicism, of the opposite of emunah. Those are serious enemies. That's the bechina of tzayfer rasha l'tzadik u'mevakesh la'amisai. David HaMelech also says to Tehillim, the rasha, the wicked, is running after the righteous person. U'mevakesh la'amisai say chazal the Gemara Baba Basra, hu ha-satan, hu ha-malach ha-maves, hu ha-Yetzer Hara. This is the Yetzer Hara. That's the real enemy. Sheroitzim l'mana miderech ha'chayim. That's trying to make our lives miserable, irrespective of the challenging situations that we face. Because if a person didn't have the Yetzer Hara that's preventing the person from mamish leaning on the staff of bitachon, a person would be okay. A person would still manage to carry on with a smile. A person would still manage to be connected to Hashem in a way that would give their life meaning and purpose and vitality, vibrancy, and joy. But the inner oivim, the inner enemies, the army of Esav with his 400 men, the Yetzer Hara, the tough Alma de Piruta, that place, that wants to withhold us from living, from Va'atem adveikim Hashem lekechem chayim kulchem hayom ularida l'shal tachdius chas v'shalom, and wants to make us crazy and drag us down to shal tachdius. If a person isn't careful. Says the Rebbe, this is what David HaMelech was talking about. Yes, obviously on a simple pshat level, he's running away from Shaul and Avshalom, and he's being chased and he's being harassed and etc., etc., etc. But the pneumius of that, David HaMelech knew that that's not the ikar. That's maybe a manifestation of what's going on inside of himself. Because the primary advice of how to get close to Hashem, I spoke about this Thursday night. This year has also been posted online. How the world has it mamish the opposite. And they used to refer to the Amei Haaretz, they used to refer to them as Tehillim Zuggers, as like the people who sit and say Tehillim all day, and it was a derogatory thing. It was a derogatory thing. It was like Nebuch on these people, they're such big ignoramuses that all they can do is say Tehillim. Says the Rebbe, no. That's the primary kirva to Hashem. That's the primary opening of the channel. Then you fill it with Torah, and Torah becomes prayerful in such a way where, like we learned also in Kesser Shem Tov on Sunday, the famous Torah from the Baal Shem Tov, where the Gemara says you cannot compare a person who learns something 100 times to a person who learns something 101 times, but it doesn't say 101 times, it says 100 times and one. It doesn't say Mea ve'echad pa'amim. Says the Baal Shem Tov, it's strange. Why doesn't it say you can't compare a person who learns something 100 times Lemea pa'amim to a person who learns something 101 times? Lemea ve'echad pa'amim. No, it says Mea pa'amim ve'echad. Says the Baal Shem, because it's not talking about 101 times. It's talking about that same 100 times. A person's mamish learning, but you can't compare a person who's learning on such a madrega that they learned something 100 times to a person who's holding on that same madrega of limud, also learning something 100 times, but it's im ha'echad. It's in the context of being davuk with the echad, yachid, umiyuchad with Hashem. So it's mea pa'amim because you're learning the thing 100 times, but it's mea pa'amim ve'echad. And it's seen in the context of a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the Malamed Torah la'am Yisrael. Can't compare. When a person is a Tehillim Yid, a person is a Hispodidus Yid, a person is a bitachon Yid, an Emunah Yid, so then the Torah is connected kulam, like without a question. But it has to be a Torah that's a prayerful Torah. A Torah of Emunah. A Torah of Yerushalayim. So the Iker Eitzah is who rak amiras tehillim mashar tchinas v'abakashavs is boidus lefarish sichos HaRan lebein kaina. That's the way in. That's the shar. Zeh hashar l'Hashem tzadikim yavayu vay. That's the gate. David HaMelech speaks about the gate. David is Malchus. Malchus is the final sphera, so to speak. You have to get through Malchus. Bezois Yavai Aaron ala Kodesh, the Shari Oyer explains, is a reference to the sphera of Malchus, which is the feminine. Kimi Ish Lukacha Zois, a reference to Chava, which is the concept of the feminine. Malchus. Bezois Yavai Aaron ala Kodesh. You want to get to Kodesh, which is Torah, you got to go through Tefillah. Bezois Yavai Aaron ala Kodesh. To be Zoicha to every madrega is through Zahis, is through Malchus, is through Tehillim, is through David HaMelech. Malchus Peh, which is Tefillah. Emunah, that's first. Levakish Melafanav Shikarveu Lavadas Yisbarach, where a person davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please let me be Zoicha to serve you. But it's the way in. And then hopefully a person is able to win. A person is able to persevere in these crazy, terrible, difficult battles. If a person will be so strong, and I know it's a strange lashon here in this context, because a person who's full of davening all the time is so weak, in a certain way. They're so vulnerable. But the Rebbe says, no, it takes a lot of courage to not give up on tefillah. Tamid lahater v'lispalav v'lischan l'fnei Hashem yisbarach, tamid, no matter what. In the face of an atheistic, anti-religious, secular world that mocks this kind of thing. It takes tremendous courage, Ezu Gibar HaKovish Yitzray, not to give in, even when it looks like the tefillahs aren't working. You carry on, you carry on, you carry on, no matter what. No matter what the situation is. Tefillah, tefillah, tefillah. As bevadai, says the Rebbe, Yenatseach HaMelchama. Not just that maybe one day in the future you will win the war, but you're already winning. Because the whole thing of the Satan is to get us to stop davening. That's the whole thing of the Satan, is to cast us into hopelessness, into atzvos, into the bechina of asher karcha baderech, that we're on a journey going from point A to point B, and Amalek comes in the middle and says, where are you trying to go? There is no point B. There's no hemshich, there's no place to get. Give up. That's Amalek. That's Mamash Amalek. That's what Amalek wants. And so, to be menatseach in the Melchama is to be chazak va'amitz ma'oid tamid lahater v'lispal l'schanin, never to give up hope. And that's what Tehillim is. It's an expression of hopefulness. It's the belief that no matter how the situation looks currently in this moment on the surface, things can change. This is what we understood from the teaching of the Rebbe. Specifically in Rabbi Nachman's Torahs, you find countless eitzas, practical pieces of advice, so much so that Rabbi Nassan famously wrote a sefer called Lekutei Eitzas, where he went through the whole corpus of Rabbi Nachman's writings and he extracted the practical advice from it. The Sfarim of the Rebbe are filled with eitzas. They're filled with eitzas. Shemaleim the eitzas l'skar Hashem Yisbarach. That there are so many different particular pieces of advice to use to get close to Hashem. So Says Reb Nosson, good. It's easier said or read than done. That's a new one. Easier read than done. It's easy to read it. And maybe it was easy for whoever says it to say it, but it's hard to do it. So we need tefillah to help us access the eitzos. Right? I'm sorry about that. We need tefillah so that we can get to the other eitzos. Meaning the eitzos are so difficult. So Rabbi Nachman says, listen, this and this, let's say, tarvav, tshuva, to hear a person being embarrassed and not to answer. And that's a huge skula for tshuva. Okay. But that's really hard to do. And so we need to daven that we should be zaycha to be able to do the eitzos of the Rebbe. That also needs tefillah. Akena ikar hu tefillas v'tchinas of akashas. The main thing is prayer. No matter what you're going through. Ask Hashem, you read an eitzah, how can I fulfill this? That's the idea, which we're going to see in a minute, to close this year. That's the idea of turning Torah into tefillah, which Rabbi Nachman told Reb Nosson is so crucial. Aside from all the Kabbalah inyanim in that, which is so deep, which is mamish yichud kutcha b'richu shchinte, to turn Torah into tefillah, it's incredibly deep. But al pi pshat, it's this. You read about an eitzah in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, and we daven. We should be zaycha to do it, because it's not so simple to do. It's easier read than done. But the mamish do it. That Hashem should take us out of darkness and bring us into a life that's filled with light, that's filled with joy, that's filled with clarity, that's filled with mission, that's filled with everything good. That a person should be taken back, to return to our youth, to return to our innocence, to our purity, to our health. And don't be silent until we're answered, not to give up. And here he brings that even though a person will have called out and cried out to Hashem for so many years, and it doesn't seem to be working, so that no matter where a person goes, and a person's alone for a little bit, they have their espoididos outside the set times for espoididos, but a person slips in his espoididos the whole day long, and a person's begging Hashem, please, karveini elecha, bring me close to you for years, and segeitnish, still big challenges. Says Reb Nosson, don't give up, because that's the whole thing of tefillah, is not to give up. How can we give up on our tefillahs? The whole thing of a tefillah is that you believe that there's no yush in the world. If we won't give up and we'll be so strong in this inyan, in the end it will be good, because it's a good life, even a life that's incomplete because we're still davening, that we need so much help, and so, but a life that's filled with tefillah is a good life, a life where we have a wand that we don't like wave in the air. It's like Amaratzos, like they wave a wand. The wand is a stick. You walk with the wand. That we have the wand of bitachon. We have a wand of a staff that we could lean on, rely on. And we trust that there's hope for the world. We trust that Hashem is running the show, that Hashlich al Hashem Yahavacha v'hu yichal kalecha, that we cast our burden onto HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'hu, say the tzaddikim. Not that Hashem will carry the burden, but the very act of casting our burden onto Hashem yichal kalecha, that will sustain us, because that's a good life. V'atem adveikim Hashem lekeichem, and that's what tefillah is a lashon of dveikus. Like naftule likim niftalti means to bind, like tefillin, we bind around our hands. That's what tefillah is dveikus chayim kul chamayim. That's the chayim tovim. That's the good life. So in the end, it'll be good for you. Without a question. It's a long ball game. We don't give up. We don't give up on our not giving up. Ein shum yush ba'olam klal. Ein Ein. Tefillah itself needs a lot of chizuk. We call out to our Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it doesn't seem to work. Chazak v'yametz libecha v'kave el Hashem. Carry on. There's a bigger picture. We don't know, like Rabbi Nachman says in Torah Beis, how much our tefillahs are contributing to a much bigger structure until the day where the final tefillah is uttered and the final brick is placed, and Evin ma'asu aboinim, which of course a reference to tefillah, haisel roish pina, and the Torah is turned into tefillah, and the tefillah is turned into Torah, and there's vaya arlav and a kar hachama, and all of a sudden everything is rectified and everything is fixed. What do we know? If you see that the tefillah doesn't seem to be getting received, chazor v'kaveh. Now come back and keep on davening with the humility also of knowing that it could be that I'm not meant to get this thing. Both. And this is how it goes forever. Until HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down upon us min hashemayim. Let's take a look quickly at the last two sources here. The first is from Likutei Halachos in Hilchos Arla, Dalid Yud Zayin. And Rav Nosson here says, the primary gate to be able to enter into a relationship with Hashem is to cry out from the deepest depth of our heart, no matter what you're going through in life. Never ever give up on crying out to Hashem, which is itself, again, not giving up because you believe that things aren't the way they should be now, but they could get better in the future. That's the premise of prayer. Like Rabbi Nachman said again and again and again in thousands of different ways. Over there he's discussing Hoshana Rabbah and the whole journey from Rosh Hashanah to Aseret Smitchuvi, Yom Kippur, 4 days, Sukkot, all the way Shmini Atzeres, Hoshana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres. Kama v'kama pa'amim, Hoshana. And the whole Hoshana Rabbah is the day of the Yom Ha'arava. It's the day of David HaMelech. It's the Ushpizin of David Malka Mashiach. The whole thing is just tefillah. And the Aravis is the lips, and it has to do with tefillah, and it has to do with the person that's beaten down, and it has to do with the person that doesn't give up, and it has to do with the Evin Ma'asu Abaynim that, like the Aravis, the Yeshanis that we take and we throw them on top of the Aron, like the Kloisenberger Rebbe said, that becomes Haisel Roish Pina. That's what Hoshana Rabbah is. So the whole thing is we don't give up, and again and again and again we're calling out Hoshana, Hoshana, V'china Aron Kol Halayla. And we stay up, as a minute to stay up, a goyimrim called sefer Tehillim, and we say the whole sefer Tehillim, Shu Malit Sa'akas Za'akas V'Shavas U'Tchinas V'Akajas U'Tfilas La'Hashem Yisbarach B'Kama V'Kama Mina L'Shonis U'Malitzas Kadoshas Hanamaris B'Rosh Hashanah HaKadosh. All these different things are wrapped up in sefer Tehillim, crying and pleading and supplicating and begging and praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all different ways. Very similar to the ways that we say, like we said earlier, on Rosh Hashanah, that are relevant to the whole world. Says the Rebbe, says Rav Nosson, till you cannot find one wicked person, ubal aveira, and a person that's connected to averas ba'olam in this entire planet, who wouldn't be able to find his own circumstances, dire, hopeless as they may appear to be on the surface. You will not find one wicked person in this world, no matter how miserably wicked, who cannot find himself in Sefer Tehillim. HaKoil kol ba'olam, which included, like we've said now a number of times, all human beings in the world, b'chol hadoros, in every generation, b'chol hamadregas, shaba'olam, and on every level, from the highest madrigas to the lowest madriga, says Rav Nosson, that you couldn't even, it's not feasible for there to be a lower madriga than the madriga of this particular person. Good. Open a sefer Tehillim. L'kulam hu ma'orer. David HaMelech wakes up every single person. B'tza'akoisav u'tfiloisav lashav la'Hashem Yisbarach. Like we learned Shemavor Adam Razal in that teaching, which we learned, quoted from earlier, B'simin Ayin Gimel Tehillim is Mesugal Tshuva. It's relevant for everyone. Not to give up. Not to give up. Let's take a look finally at this last piece from Likutei Halachos Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, Perek Hey. Drush Hey. Ois Zayin. And Rav Nosson says, "V'zeh b'chinas ma shekasav Admar Rabbeinu Zechron Levracha." Again, in that same Torah that we've been quoting, Ayin Gimel, she'ikra tshuva al yedei amiras Tehillim, that the primary tshuva is through saying Tehillim. Ki kol sefer Tehillim him tchinas avakasha shel David HaMelech alav hashalom, that the whole sefer Tehillim is the words and the pleadings and the supplications of David HaMelech. Shebikesh me'Hashem yisbarach lizkos liskar v'elav, and the whole thing is David asking Hashem, bring me close to you. U'likayim torasu mitzvaysav, like we said earlier. Good, you have eitzas, there's Torah, but we have to daven that we should be able to be mekayim the Torah. B'zais yavei aron el hakodesh. The way to get in is through zais, which is a reference to tefillah. Where David HaMelech says that the whole Sefer Tehillim is wrapped up in one thing. David HaMelech says, well, I asked many things of you in Sefer Tehillim. There's many different ways that David HaMelech is asking different things. But at the end of the day, David says, it's really just one thing. Achas sha'alti me'es Hashem oisa avakesh, which is shifti beves Hashem kol yemei chayai. Let me live with emunah. That's what it means. It means to live in this world with a recognition that this is God's house. This is where Hashem's presence, just like a person who goes to their grandparents' house, even if the grandparents aren't there, but the grandparents are there because the whole home is saturated, aside from the smell. That's also sometimes true, depending on how old the grandparents are. But the home is filled with their presence. There are pictures on the wall and their little knickknacks, sitting on top of the cupboard, and all the different things. The sofa, either covered over with plastic or not covered over with plastic, again, depending on the age of the grandparents in question. But the presence of the grandparents saturates this space. This is God's home. We can't see him. He's not present in the way that we'd love for him to be, completely revealed in it. But to sense his presence, this is what David HaMelech is asking for. Shivti beves Hashem kol yemei chayai. Let me realize that kol yemei chayai, all the days of my life, are lived within the bias of Hashem. Uksiv hareini Hashem darkecha halach b'amitecha. Hashem, show me your ways. Shine for me your truth. Azreinu lasas ritzoincha. Help me to do your will. V'chein harbe. And there are so many other examples. V'chol ma'ashem avakesh lihinatzel mi oiva v'soinav. And all of David HaMelech saying and asking Hashem, help me that I should be spared from my enemies. Kol kavanasi lihinatzel misoina nefesh. He was referring to the inside enemies, the enemies of the Yetzer Hara. Shema sitra achar b'chiloisav. And even the physical enemies, really, David HaMelech was saying, well, free me from them, not just stam that I should be able to live life and put my feet up and drink a pina colada and, whatever else it is. No, he's saying, help that I should have the yishav adas, that I shouldn't have to be running away from shul, so that I can serve you properly with Torah and mitzvahs. I don't have to be on the go all the time. It's all just bilbulim of the Yetzer Hara, because the Yetzer Hara really does not want us to serve Hashem. It is a soinei haTorah, soinei hanefesh. Shemeshvil zeh miskarim banu. Nimtza shekol seinenu va'avinu begashmis. Even in the physical strata, meaning literal things that we're struggling with, chas v'shalom, people, are making life miserable for us. And we have enemies, chas v'shalom, on a practical, physical level. It's weiter ruchni, because it's just the Yetzer Hara that's nislabish, that it's taking this form, but it's still the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara just isn't interested in making us sad or upset, but it has to do with preventing us from serving Hashem the way that we're supposed to serve Hashem. So asking Hashem to free us from that, if it's doichak and parnasa, whatever it is, a person has a health challenge, really at the end of the day, what you're really asking for is that I really just want to serve you. Like the Viceroy asked for those three things: the horse, the servant, the money for expenses, in chapter, is it 4, I think, of the story of our lives over there in the story of the Lost Princess. Asking for the things that we need: physical health, mental health, money, finances, but not for those things themselves. So then we could just carry on living a silly little life. No, so mamish, that I should be able to serve Hashem properly, so I can be mekayim the Torah. And this was David HaMelech's whole thing. That's it. That was what David wanted. Haklal shekol kavanas David HaMelech alav shalom b'sefer Tehillim hu levakish me'Hashem Yisbarach shenizka l'kayim es haTorah v'hamitzvos li'inatzah mikol hasoyim v'hamoyim v'ha'akvim la'avoid es Hashem Yisbarach b'gashmis v'ruchnis, that I should be free to be able to serve Hashem. And he finishes, I'll just say it outside, he says that's why David HaMelech wrote his 5 books of Tehillim, because Tehillim is split into 5 Sefarim, Keneged Chamishe Chumshei Torah. As if to say that not only on a metaphorical level, when David HaMelech asks Hashem to save him from his enemies, was he referring really to the internal Yetzaharas, but even on a Gashmius level, David HaMelech is asking for anything Gashmi, that we find our own circumstances in Tehillim, and we're actually asking Hashem for Parnasa. Even so, it's 5 books of Tehillim Keneged the Chamishe Chumshei Torah, because it's all just to be able to get through the doorway of Bezois Yavei Aron Ala Kodesh, through that doorway of Malchus Peh, using our mouths to enter in, that then we could be able to access a life of serving Hashem the way that we really want to, but we're just prevented. So Arsha Be'isa Ma'akiv in so many millions of ways. And so he says that's the depth of the 5 books of Tehillim being Keneged the 5 Sfarim of Torah, to remind us that that's really what it was all about. And so we can all find ourselves in Sefer Tehillim, whatever we're going through. He says the biggest Russia in the world is that Yerida, that there's no other Yerida under that. We can't even imagine what that means. Takes a wild imagination to imagine such a thing, Even for that person. But the main thing is not to give up. And the main thing is realizing there's a doorway. There is a Pesach, and that Pesach is called Tshuva. And even if the doors are closed, like we said, Tshuva can inspire our hearts to want to do Tshuva. It can help us find our own path, our own particular way to do Tshuva. And when we get to the door, Zeh Ashar LaHashem, Tzadikim Yavayu Vay, the door is wide open. And so what an apropos thing to be learning now. During Elul, Rabbi Nachman closes that Torah Ayin Gimel and says that's why during Elul you see that everybody's saying Tehillim. And it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, in Mishnah Berurah at least, that you can finish Tehillim 3 times a cheshbon during this time period, because Tehillim is Mesugel Tshuva. And it's not a small thing. It's a very, very big thing to devote time every day if we can, especially during Elul, but all the time, to be saying Tehillim in this way, to find ourselves in it. And Be'ezus Hashem, through that we should be Zeicha to Tshuva Shlema, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha, and V'nashuva Chadei Shemini Kedem, to mamish renew our lives and the whole world. Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach. Okay, Shukach, thank you. I'm sorry we went a little bit over time. I really appreciate all of you being here, and wishing everybody the most remarkable rest of the week. Chazak v'yamat. Thank you so much for joining.